The dazzling aura and angelic voice of Karen Carpenter captivated millions, but behind the stage lights lay a cruel truth few truly knew. Her life was not only a story of dazzling success but also a tragedy marked by loneliness and invisible pressures that slowly destroyed her. For years, rumors of tense family dynamics, strict control, and shocking secrets surrounded her life. Now, Richard Carpenter, her brother and lifelong musical companion, has finally broken his silence, revealing what really happened behind the scenes. As Richard himself said, "The little colossal because it brought out the greatness in Karen and my arranging abilities," referring to the music that defined them. Karen Carpenter was born on March 2, 1950, in New Haven, Connecticut, while Richard was born 4 years earlier, on October 15, 1946. Their parents, Agnes Ruhr and Harold Bertram Carpenter, had a cold and distant marriage and showed little genuine concern for their children. Agnes blatantly favored Richard, leaving Karen feeling like little more than a shadow within the family. Their father, in contrast, had a deep love for music and owned an impressive record collection spanning various genres: rock, jazz, classical, pop, and soul. This treasure trove of sound profoundly shaped both siblings. Encouraged by their father, Richard showed early musical promise, starting with the accordion before mastering the piano. Karen, however, was less interested in performance at first, preferring to simply listen to music. It wasn't until her teenage years that she discovered a passion for singing and playing instruments. Despite typical sibling quarrels, Karen and Richard remained close. Karen was full of energy and loved sports. She even outshone Richard in neighborhood baseball games, which occasionally irritated him. Agnes' favoritism only grew more obvious over time. She constantly defended Richard while scolding Karen, even for the smallest of mistakes. When Richard turned 16, his piano skills had become impressive, and believing he had a real shot at a professional music career, the family relocated to Southern California in 1963. Karen had no say in the decision, though she was reluctant to leave her friends behind. While Richard started performing in clubs, often lying about his age, Karen joined the school band simply to avoid gym class. That accidental choice would ignite her love for drumming. In 1965, Richard formed the Richard Carpenter Trio, with Karen on drums and their friend Wes Jacobs on bass. Despite frequent disagreements, Richard declined to include Karen's name in the band's title. Even so, the trio quickly rose in the local scene, performing a blend of popular covers and original songs. Their first major success came in 1966 when they won a prominent music competition and signed a deal with RCA Records. But the soft jazz style they favored couldn't compete with the surging popularity of rock, and RCA soon canceled their contract, leading to the group's disbandment. Undeterred, Richard launched a new group called Spectrum, focusing on vocal harmonies. Although Spectrum failed to gain traction, it was during this time that Richard discovered something extraordinary. Karen wasn't just a great drummer, she had an enchantingly pure and crystal-clear singing voice. Believing it could be their path to success, he convinced Karen to step forward as the lead vocalist. At the time, Karen was 17 and weighed 143 pounds, 65 kilograms, slightly above the era's beauty standards. After losing around 11 pounds, 5 kilograms, she received compliments that sparked an obsession with weight control, an obsession that would haunt her for years. In early 1969, their long-awaited break arrived when a friend passed along their demo tape to a record label. Herb Alpert, a celebrated trumpeter and co-founder of A&M Records, was immediately struck by Karen's voice and offered them a contract. Since Karen was not yet 21, their parents had to sign on her behalf. On October 9, 1969, the Carpenters debuted with their first album, Offering, which featured Richard on most lead vocals. Unfortunately, the album didn't perform well, and A&M executives considered dropping them. Yet Alpert believed in their potential and stood by them, a decision that would change music history. Herb Alpert, also married to singer Lonnie Hall, not only supported them as a producer but introduced them to the song that would become their breakthrough hit, They Long to Be Close to You. Though the song had been recorded by Richard Chamberlain, Dionne Warwick, Dusty Springfield, and even Alpert himself, none had achieved success with it. Alpert felt that Karen and Richard could bring it to life, and he was right. Released on May 14, 1970, Close to You became a nationwide sensation, selling 3 million copies within 6 months and reaching number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 by July 25. Success continued. Inspired by a wedding commercial jingle, Richard composed We've Only Just Begun, which was released just 3 months after Close to You and soared to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, just behind Simon and Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water. The song sold over 1 million copies and earned the Carpenters 2 Grammy Awards in 1971. In just 1 year, they had gone from unknowns to international stars. Both hits were included on their second album, Close to You, released in late August 1970, which became an instant classic. On January 15, 1971, Karen released For All We Know, which quickly climbed to number 3 on the Billboard charts. By April 23, 1971, they followed with Rainy Days and Mondays, which peaked at number 2. Then came Superstar, another emotionally intense ballad that reached number 2 and cemented their status as icons. Both songs were featured on their third album, Carpenters, released on May 14, 1971, the first to display their now iconic logo. Though Karen was the heart and soul of the Carpenters, mesmerizing audiences with her hauntingly beautiful voice, she still chose to sit behind the drums whenever she could. But as their fame grew, so did the pressure, and the burden she silently carried behind the spotlight. During early performances, Karen Carpenter often played drums while her brother Richard and other musicians stood front and center. However, this setup began to draw criticism in 1971, prompting Richard, under mounting pressure from fans and the media, to let Karen take the spotlight. From that point forward, Karen blossomed into an irreplaceable star, her charisma and vocal brilliance gradually eclipsing Richard's presence. Their fame soared even higher on June 19, 1972, with the release of Goodbye to Love, a commercial triumph and a musical innovation. The song featured a bold fuzz guitar solo, a rare move at the time, pioneered by Richard. This performance is credited with giving birth to the modern power ballad. The song was part of their fourth album, A Song for You, released in June 1972, which spawned more hits like Hurting Each Other, peaking at number 2, It's Going to Take Some Time, reaching number 12, and Top of the World, which climbed to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Their popularity even extended to politics. On August 1, 1972, the Carpenters were invited by President Richard Nixon to perform at the White House, marking a significant milestone. On stage, they embodied the American dream, but behind the curtain, their personal lives were far more complex and tragic. To combat chronic insomnia, Richard began using the sedative methaqualone, which was legally available in the U.S. at the time. Unfortunately, he became addicted quickly, falling into a downward spiral. This same drug would later be depicted in The Wolf of Wall Street for its devastating effects. Meanwhile, Karen became fixated on her weight after a harsh article criticized her for appearing slightly overweight. The accompanying photo deeply affected her, launching her into a dangerous cycle of extreme dieting. Despite his addiction, Richard remained professionally active, pouring himself into music in hopes that Karen's talent could carry them through their struggles. His efforts bore fruit on May 1, 1973, with the release of Now and Then, a successful album that reinforced the Carpenters' dominance in the charts. Yet behind their success, Karen's health deteriorated. By 1974, she had dropped to 99 pounds, about 45 kilograms, secretly hiding food, abusing laxatives, and obsessing over her appearance. She encouraged Richard to seek rehab but refused to acknowledge her own issues, blaming stress for her weight loss. In reality, she was battling anorexia nervosa, a poorly understood eating disorder at the time. To mask her frail appearance, she wore layers of clothing, and while audiences saw a radiant performer, few realized the extent of her suffering. Despite her declining health, the Carpenters continued their work. On June 6, 1975, they released their sixth album Horizon, but Karen's increasingly gaunt look sparked rumors that she had cancer. In truth, she had begun using syrup of ipecac, a drug that induces vomiting, to maintain her figure, further damaging her already fragile body. Her family remained largely unaware of her condition. By 1976, their popularity began to wane. Their seventh album, A Kind of Hush, released on June 11, failed to meet expectations. Nevertheless, they had already sold over 150 million records worldwide. Karen's voice, haunting, pure, and emotional, earned its place as one of the greatest female voices in music history. But her success couldn't heal the emptiness in her heart. Although she dated several prominent men, Karen never found true love. Then, in the early 1980s, she met Thomas James Burris, a charming real estate developer 9 years her senior. They met at a high-end restaurant and quickly became a couple. However, Burris was secretly drowning in debt and saw Karen as a way out. After a brief courtship, he proposed, and they scheduled their wedding for August 31, 1980, at the Crystal Room of the Beverly Hills Hotel. At 30 years old, Karen believed she had finally found the family and love she yearned for. But just days before the wedding, Burris revealed he had undergone a vasectomy and could not have children. Devastated, Karen wanted to cancel the wedding, but her mother insisted it was too late. Hoping to please her, Karen went through with the marriage, a decision that would cost her dearly. After the wedding, Burris showed his true self. He recklessly spent Karen's money on extravagant luxuries and subjected her to both emotional and physical abuse. Within a year, Karen filed for divorce, but the emotional damage had been done. Despite her failing health, Karen's obsession with thinness only intensified. She increased her use of laxatives to 90 pills a night and abused thyroid medication to speed up her metabolism. The more she tried to control her body, the more it spiraled out of control. By 1981, her condition could no longer be hidden. Determined to get help, Karen defied her family's objections and traveled to New York to consult Stephen Levenkron, a leading specialist in eating disorders. For a time, it seemed she was making progress, but hope was short-lived. The final months of Karen Carpenter's life were a painful dance between fragile recovery and tragic decline. Levenkron, recognizing the gravity of her condition, arranged a family therapy session with Karen, Richard, and their mother Agnes. He emphasized that beyond medical help, Karen needed genuine emotional support. Richard tried to show his love, but what pierced Karen's heart the most was her mother's cold silence. Agnes, the one person Karen most longed to receive love and validation from, remained distant. In September 1982, as Karen's health became critical, she was admitted to Lenox Hill Hospital in New York. There, doctors began intravenous nutrition therapy to help her gain weight rapidly. Tragically, her frail heart, worn down by years of starvation and erratic habits, couldn't handle the sudden physical strain. The very treatment meant to save her would become the final blow. Karen Carpenter's body had become a ticking time bomb, her heart dangerously weakened by years of malnutrition. Yet despite the physical and emotional torment she endured, Karen continued to pursue her career. On December 17, 1982, she gave her final performance at the multi-purpose room of Buckley School in Sherman Oaks, California. No one in attendance knew they were witnessing the fading brilliance of one of the most hauntingly beautiful voices in music history. Then, on the morning of February 4, 1983, tragedy struck. Her mother, Agnes, found her collapsed and unconscious on the floor. Though Karen was rushed to the hospital, all efforts to save her failed. Her heart had stopped. She was just 32 years old. In 1989, 6 years after her death, CBS produced a biographical film about Karen's life. However, it only scratched the surface of her truth. Richard and Agnes insisted on removing scenes that depicted Karen's emotional suffering and her longing for maternal approval. They wanted to preserve the glamorous image of Karen on stage, rather than reveal the pain and pressure she quietly endured. Despite his initial reluctance to relive the trauma, Richard Carpenter became the guardian of his sister's legacy. For years, he devoted himself to restoring, re-releasing, and remastering the Carpenters' music, allowing new generations to experience their emotional depth and musical brilliance. Under his loving care, their songs didn't just endure, they flourished, transcending time. Richard also began to open up about the unseen struggles Karen had faced. In one interview he said, "There's so much about Karen that the public never knew. She wasn't just an angelic voice. She was a passionate person who carried an enormous amount of pain." From quiet, ordinary moments to the relentless pressures of fame, Richard shared a deeper understanding of their unique sibling bond, one of both creative magic and emotional dependency. The most shocking revelation came when Richard finally confirmed a long-whispered truth. Karen was crushed by pressure, from her family, the industry, and herself. "I saw her gradually change," he admitted, "but none of us realized how serious it was until it may have been too late." One of the most heartfelt milestones in preserving her legacy came in 1996, with the posthumous release of Karen's solo album, a project she had completed in 1979 but never saw released during her lifetime. The album offered a bittersweet glimpse into a bold artistic path she never got to fully explore. The songs reflected her personal struggles and aspirations, revealing a more daring and emotionally raw side of her talent. Richard confessed, Karen never had the opportunity to show her true self. She wanted to break free from her image and try new musical styles, but she was held back. If her solo album had come out while she was alive, maybe everything would have been different. Karen Carpenter's story remains one of both stunning success and profound heartbreak. Though her life ended far too soon, the legacy she left behind lives on in every tender lyric and haunting ballad. Her voice continues to move hearts around the world, an irreplaceable icon whose emotional honesty and ethereal sound remain unmatched. What do you think of Karen Carpenter's tumultuous journey? Do Richard's revelations change how you view her? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow our channel for more untold stories.